So you're tired of wasting too much material because your Cricut just hasn't cut it properly. Well, don't worry, because I'm going to show you a nice foolproof way of making sure that you get the perfect cut every time. So the first piece of advice I have for you is to make sure that you always do a test cut. No matter what material this is, if you haven't cut it before, make sure that you do a test cut first, because you really don't want to be wasting an entire 12 by 12 of vinyl because it's a new brand and you're not quite sure on the right setting to use. You send your design to cut and then it doesn't cut it properly. So please take a few minutes to just do a test cut. It'll save you a lot of heartache in the future. So what we're going to do in Cricut Design Space is we're going to open up a shape first, because then it'll be at the back. And then we're going to open a text box and let's use the letter A. It doesn't really matter which letter you use, as long as it's a letter. Letters are nicer because then you get a little bit more of an intricate cut. And I also like to choose a letter with something on the inside, like that little part in the A, so that I can weed that out and see how that weeds as well. A much smaller thing. So then we want to change the size, because a 4 centimeter square or so is a little big. So I'm just going to make it so that the A is not too big in the square. And I'm going to center align them, and then I'm going to reduce the size to around 1.5 centimeters or so. And then here we select everything and we click attach. It obviously needs to cut exactly like that in Design Space. I need to have the A cut inside the box in order to test the cut settings properly. Right, so now we have our A in our box. We've selected everything, we've attached it to make sure that it's going to cut, and now we're going to click Make It. I'm going to be using my Maker 3, so I'm going to be cutting it on a mat. And I'm going to click done. And here we see our little design in the top corner there. Now we can click continue and wait for a second while it connects to the machine. And here's where you can select your starting point. So as an example, I'm going to be using this to test a different kind of vinyl that I haven't cut on my Cricut before. So because it's adhesive vinyl, I'm going to go over to the popular tab, and I'm going to look for Premium Vinyl Permanent Glossy. So I'm going to click on that one. And that's what I use as my starting point to make sure that I've got a good baseline to know whether I should increase or decrease the pressure. Now, vinyl is typically your most challenging one to get the perfect cut settings, because you need to make sure the blade pierces the top film but doesn't go through the bottom film. The bottom film is the backing, and if you cut into the backing, then typically what happens is the backing ends up sticking to the vinyl and kind of delaminating, and part of that ends up coming off. So it's a little bit of a tricky, as you need to get a kiss cut on that one, which quite simply just means what I've explained now, to only pierce the top film but not to pierce the backing. So in this case here, we load the vinyl onto the mat, we send it into the machine to cut, and we can evaluate it once we've weeded. If you are enjoying this video and finding it particularly helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more Cricut and craft related tutorials in the future. Now the first part that I like to weed on my test cut is the outside box, just to see if that comes off nicely. Okay, so that did come off quite nicely there. And now, of course, because we've cut an A, we have a tiny little section on the inside. So we want to see if that one weeds nicely. That one weeded quite well as well. The next thing I like to check is to take the entire letter off and see what the indentations have been on the backing. So as we can see here, it has cut beautifully, but it hasn't cut into the backing sheet. So that's pretty much the perfect setting that we have. We have the right pressure on that one. For this vinyl setting, we definitely don't need to increase the pressure at all. Let's say we didn't get a great cut and we need to change the material settings. In order to do that, all you need to do is click on this down arrow, and you see here it says Browse All Materials. So we can click that, and it'll open up all of the materials that are available currently to cut on your Cricut. If you're wanting to search for a particular material, you can use the search bar at the top, and as an example, you can type in vinyl and click search, and it'll bring up all of the different kinds of vinyl that you can cut on your machine. Alternatively, if you want to change a material setting, down at the bottom, you can click on material settings, and it'll bring up the entire list of material settings that is compatible with your machine. So we can scroll down to the bottom as we are looking for Premium Vinyl Permanent Glossy, and here we are. So we can go to this one, and then you can click on Edit, And then here's where you can use the sliding scale. And what this does is it changes the pressure of the cut. And if you found that it wasn't quite cutting through, then you can increase it a few points. So I would suggest increasing it in increments of 5 or 10. I wouldn't go too much higher than 10. It depends on how blunt your blade was. I would probably increase it to around 125 and then click save. I'm not wanting to save this one as the pressure that we had was perfect, so I'm going to leave it at 120. Now, if you find that that is not a material that you cut very often and you don't want to permanently alter one of your predefined materials, you can scroll right the way to the bottom and click on Add New Material. And here is where you can add your custom material. So let's call this one Rainbow Holographic. And then we click Save. And here is where we can change the settings. So here's where we would then go down to 125. We would make sure that we have the fine point blade selected. This section here is how many passes that you need. So as an example, if you're cutting cardboard, then you may need to decrease your pressure and increase the number of passes that you are doing. As I've found that sometimes if you're cutting on too high a pressure with only one pass, it'll actually rip through the material. So typically that's what I do, decrease the pressure and increase the number of passes. But in this case, we're going to leave it off as we don't need to go through the different passes. And then we can quite simply just click save, and then your rainbow holographic will be saved as a material. And what you can do is scroll right the way to the top, click the X. You can search for your material again. So we go browse all materials. Let's search for rainbow. And then we see the material coming up, and you see how it has this little star. So you can click that star. Then when you go back to the main screen, you will see that that material is there as one of your favorites, so that you don't have to go through that entire process every time. I would recommend keeping your favorites as either things that you use all the time or things that aren't on the popular field. If they're on the popular field, then chances are they'll be there pretty much all the time, so you won't need to have them in your favorites. If you've gone through all of these steps and you're still finding that you're not getting the right cut settings, you might need to consider the fact that your blade might be very dull, which might be causing you problems, and unfortunately it may be time for a new one. You may also consider cleaning your blade. Now what you can do in this case is to take a ball of aluminium foil, crunch it up, and poke the ball with the blade. Now this does not sharpen the blade, contrary to popular belief, but what it does do is it does remove a lot of the goo and the gunk that may have been built up onto your blade. Especially if you're cutting adhesive vinyl, you're cutting through adhesive, which is essentially glue, and that over time does build up on your blade. So you may need to clean it. If you don't have any foil that you can use, you can also try an alcohol swab. I like to use these little alcohol swabs, as I find they're very, very useful because they're small, they're disposable, and they're not that bad for the environment. Well, I hope that you learned something today, and I hope that you get all of the perfect test cuts. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel for more Cricut and craft related tutorials in the future, and I'll see you in my next video. And remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon.